Listening is a very, very interesting and I think massively underrated skill set. Just the fact that we're listening to them at a really, really deep level is a gift that almost nobody in their life is giving them. Real estate agents, welcome back. It's Reed Moore, host of the RMG Agent podcast, and I am so thrilled that you're back here with us. We just finished a series called This Is the Way, and it was a 3-part series. The one right before that kind of sets the context, and it's all about really, really surviving and thriving here in 2024. And also, along those lines, if you go to our website, rmgagentpodcast.com, you'll see the webinar that we just did a couple weeks ago. It's phenomenal. It's like a survivor's guide for this year. Take it, listen to it, take notes, look at the action guide, share it with friends. I think it's going to be a huge resource to be able to help you in this year. Speaking of helping you in this year, I have brought along for the ride to help us today with this episode, Jake Bartlett.
Hey guys, I am super jacked for this episode because I came up with the title for it and I'm pretty proud of it.
The title's awesome. Lay it on us.
So we are doing a listening episode and this one is entitled Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. So
also the hardest title to not continue on into the lyrics.
Yes.
But correct. We're going to avoid that most likely.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
I won't go into it.
Beautiful.
So we are going to lay out the 5 great points to listening, but first we should just talk about listening.
Yeah, so listening is a very, very interesting and I think massively underrated skill set. One of the things that we talked about when we went through This Is the Way series as well is just talking about building our real estate skill set, our ability to have effective conversations. A lot of it really comes down to being able to effectively listen. And what I've learned over the years is that the number of people that I've met that I think are like they raise their hand and say, I'm a good listener, is very, very few. And listening is not one of those skills that typically just shows up. It's a skill that you have to actively work on to be able to build it. And it's very interesting because like so many of what are kind of known as soft skills, they don't feel as rewarding as the skills where you can say like, these are the 3 points to execute and get this, outcome. But, underwriting all of your outcomes in life are things like listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of it specifically in context. This is our 23rd episode of this.
Yeah.
I could tell you I'm able to listen and process and be able to move forward much better now than I was the first episode just in doing this. My listening skills have gotten much better.
Yeah.
So active listening, how do you define that between the two?
Yeah, so when we look at listening, I've kind of broken this down into 5 different things that I think we can work on as professionals. And it shows up in our professional life. One of the best things about being an entrepreneur or being in business is that the business landscape provides a very, very active feedback where a lot of times our personal lives, the same skill or lack of skill is showing up in our personal life. It's just that it doesn't give us as a feedback that's as easy to understand or respond to as the business world does. Mm-hmm. And so the first of the 5 different things is active listening. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about active listening, the definition is to be fully focused on the other person's words and not my response. This is something that says easy and it does extremely hard. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm going to be an active listener with somebody and I'm going to sit in the conversation and just listen, what ends up happening is all of the different, calculations are going on in my mind and all of the different solutions, all of the different buts and everything, they all have to be put on hold. We just have to stop all of those things. And so if I go to just a random person and say, I want you to listen and I want you to completely disregard everything that's going on in your mind and just completely listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth, it's not an impossible feat, but it's pretty darn hard, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, it takes me back to our episode on the S word, right? Mm-hmm. This is the point of scripts, right? Is understanding the dialogue that you're going to use in a script so that you can actually listen to and understand that person's true issues or problems that you need to be able to help them with. So fully listening to the words that the person is saying and not thinking about what you're going to respond to. If you've ever been in kind of an awkward conversation with somebody, it's usually because you're both competing for whose dialogue is going to come out of that, and you're already thinking about what you're going to say. That's not the listening skills we want you to practice here.
Right, and there's a level of confidence in your craft or in your relationship skills that you have to be able to actively listen. Because if I'm going to sit and I'm going to truly, deeply listen, I need to be confident that when I do respond, that whatever I respond with is not something I'm going to have to stop and try to put together in real time, right? Like when it comes to the response. But the reality about active listening is when I'm working with somebody, maybe listening to a client on the phone or listening to them in a consultation, if I can stop and completely listen to what they have to say, then I actually have more information than if I was listening just for these markers that I can respond to. The other thing is when we actively listen, people feel heard. They don't feel interpreted. And if you've ever experienced somebody, there's been a few times in my life where I've met somebody really important, right? I've met somebody who's just like, way up here on a pedestal, somebody I really wanted to meet. And I remember one time I met a guy at a conference. He was a CEO of this huge company, massively wealthy, massively busy. And I happened to be in an empty corridor. It was at the end of the event where everybody's tired. And this individual stops. I'm sitting over on the ground doing some work, and he stops and he walks over to me and he just stops everything. Like he puts his phone away. You could just see it in his physical presence that he was 100% there with me, and he started asking me questions. And it's easy for somebody like, this is the right thing to do. I'm the CEO. Like I can, earn your trust by doing this. But the level of presentness that he was and how deeply he listened to my questions, like we walked out of that conversation. It was probably a 3-minute conversation, and I was a raving fan. Like I'm in, whatever, like just tell me what to do, I'm in. Mm-hmm. It was an incredible experience. It's an experience that costs you very little to provide for other people.
Yeah, you were heard and understood.
Yes.
Right.
It's amazing.
So when we're thinking of the active listening, this is golf, not football, right?
Yes.
Like this is not you competing against the other person and waiting for them to say something so you can counterpunch them. This is you're playing golf with your buddy, and while they're up hitting, you're sitting there, they hit, and you're able to respond to that hit before you go move on to what you want to do, right?
Yes. Yeah. So if you think about it that way, right? So if we think about maybe a football game, the joy of that game is this conflict, right? We're parrying and thrusting, and I'm trying to counter your moves. And there's a certain joy, and there's a certain skill that comes along with being able to do that, and that's great. That's not relationship, and that's not listening, right? Listening is a lot more like golf. I am sitting here, and everybody at the tee box, everybody is paying attention to what one person's doing until it's completely done. And then we're not even rushing to who's next. There's a pause, there's some waiting, and then everybody's paying attention to what the next person does. And even the conversation is different. Is like you hit and I don't go like, oh my gosh, look where the ball went. Mine was sometimes for fun, but the reality is we're talking about that one person exclusively until it's the next person's turn. That's active listening.
Nice. So active listening, what's the purpose for our active listening?
The purpose for our active listening is, one, to create an incredible experience for the other person, right? That other person, especially if we don't know them, we're building rapport, just the fact that we're listening to them at a really, really deep level is a gift that almost nobody in their life is giving them, right? When's the last time somebody shut down everything, put their phone completely away, turned their turrets towards you, and just said, hey, tell me how your day's going? And it wasn't like, hey, how's your day? But they squared off with you and they were completely present. That's a very rare thing, right? And so it sets the tone for all of the other points that kind of help build on active listening.
I would equate this to similar to when my wife wants to talk about something, or I ask her a question like, how was your day? And not going well, right? Sometimes they go into a story and you ask questions for them to continue the story. Well, we tend to jump in, or at least men, or I tend in and try to solve.
Sure. Yes.
And that's not the purpose, because I didn't seek to really understand what the purpose that she was trying to come across.
Right. So this is not helpful in our personal lives,
Right.
and it's equally not as helpful in our business lives. Sometimes, because our clients' needs are so very clear, like they have to buy their house, they have to sell their house, that they give us some leniency when it comes to this. And certainly people in our personal lives that love us give us some leniency. But just because somebody tolerates the way that we show up when it comes to conversation, or even that we do like, a C+ job, doesn't mean that it's great.
We're seeking and listening to understand and not respond.
Yes. So when we practice active listening, especially with clients, we have to understand that the purpose for listening is not to respond. And this sounds really counterintuitive when it comes to being a salesperson, because we train to be able to know how to respond, right? So it's not that we don't respond. The issue is that we typically respond before we understand. And so if I actively listen, and if I think about this, like, so you start talking to me, and then, I count to 5 before I respond. And I think through and I process everything that you just said, I'm going to respond differently. And a lot of times what this actually means is that I am responding for the purpose of asking additional questions. I'm not responding to say, yeah, but, or have you considered, at least not right away. I'm responding because I've fully listened. I've gotten all the context that my skills allow me to get. And now when I respond, it's actually responding to draw you out more, to provide more of a gift to you when it comes to the conversation, and to bring you into the conversation deeper. That's the reason that I want to seek first to understand, not to be understood or to respond right away.
Yeah, it's almost like those, what was Russian nesting dolls, right?
Yes.
Like you can,
exactly
you're just
right.
pulling that apart, pulling it apart and pulling it apart, and going layer by layer by layer until you get to the, the true present in the middle.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Nice.
Yep.
We talked. You briefly hinted at this. Listen without judgment, right?
Yes.
Judgment. We tend to judge a lot as a species, especially in this business as well. And if you've ever had a really poor communication experience with a client, or maybe you thought it went really great.
Yes.
Right. You thought you identified every solution, every problem that they had. You gave them all the solutions. And then they never called you after,
Right.
or they never returned your call.
Yes.
Did you judge what their problem was without getting to their problem?
Yes, one of the easiest ways to start to separate a relationship, especially a brand new one with somebody you don't have high context with, is to operate from a place of judgment instead of curiosity. And we say that, and everybody kind of has this general sense of, oh yeah, you should be in curiosity, not in judgment. So why do we keep saying it? Well, the issue is it's unbelievably hard. And if you think that you're somebody who's not judgmental, you are absolutely delusional. We are all incredibly hardwired to be judgmental. And this is, in a lot of ways, this serves you well, right? So if you weren't a good judge of distance when you came here, you would have wrecked your car. Right? If you're not a good judge of the amount of sleep that you need, you're going to wear yourself down and become intolerable, right? Like every area of your life, every single day, you are judging right from wrong. You are judging good from bad. You're judging distances. You're judging the value. You're judging everything all the time. So when we stop and we listen, we have to engage something that is completely unnatural and unbelievably foreign to almost the entire rest of our human experience. And that is that I'm going to shift into neutral. It doesn't mean, by the way, that I'm not going to eventually judge something as good or bad, or a situation to be right or wrong or anything. That's not what it means. It means that I'm going to actively listen. I'm going to listen, not to respond, right? So that I can ask more questions. And in that place, I can try to figure out what's really going on for and with this person. And we mess this up in our marriages and our relationships. We mess this up in our businesses because we get, I'll speak for myself. I get really, really overly excited when I stop and listen long enough to hear somebody dealing with an issue that I know how to solve. And I'm a great listener all the way to the point that I am 100% clear. Like my judgment is I absolutely know what you need. And I know how to teach you how to get it. And like and instantly in that moment, I have actively listened and I've listened to understand and not respond. And I jump right into judgment, right? Not judgment like you're horrible or whatever, but I judge that I am the solution or I know the solution. And as soon as I do that, the listening skills that I need to really, really deepen this relationship and really take the relationship across the finish line to be able to help this person start to dissolve.
Yeah, you said something on our last episode that I found to be profound is our brains try to think in two solutions, right?
Yes.
When there's lots of solutions to it, especially if you have past experience with something, your brain will jump to judgment on how to fix this when that actually might not be the solution for this person. That might have been the solution for you, but that might not be for them.
Yeah, and because we see the world through the only lenses that we have naturally, which are ours, there are solutions that are actually kind of unfathomable to us because of our experience and because of our perspective, that if we stop the judgment and we listen, we will learn from other people options that we didn't even consider. Right. And the issue is if I always jump in the judgment, even if they're good, sound judgments, I limit the amount of possibilities. And for years, I actually did this with my oldest son. He thinks very, very differently than I do. And so when he comes to conclusions, sometimes I can't for the life of me think how it's logical. Sometimes I look, I'm just like, actually, that wasn't very logical. Other times he comes up with a solution. And when I stop and I don't put myself into the mix, I realize that will actually get him there. And one of the biggest challenges that I have is I don't just want him to be a good man with great character. I want him to be a 40-year-old man with great character. And he's not. He's 21 years old. So the solutions that appear to me, right, are things that may have evolved over 40 some years, and they may even be only accessible to somebody who's in their 30s or 40s. And so when I step into judgment, I put all of that weight on that other person, and I actually can make it somewhat impossible for them to come to a really good solution for themselves, or even just to process what the next solution is going to be.
I do the same thing with my oldest, but mine's 9. So I expect him to be a 40-year-old man that's gone through the 31 years of life experience to get to where we're at and have all those trials and tribulations that led to the way that I think. And I expect him to do that all. That's how genetics works, right? You pass down all of your learned experience.
That's right.
So listen without judgment, and then be present and attentive.
Be present and attentive. Yes.
This is a hard one for our modern society, right? Yeah. I read a study that was, and I'm not going to quote actual percentages because I can't remember them and I don't want to be wrong. But if you have a cell phone, even turned upside down on a table,
right,
with your clients, with your spouse, with your family member, if we had a cell phone sitting here now, our attention span is significantly less than if we didn't have the phone there.
Right.
So be present and attentive. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so kind of to the phone thing, if you think about your phone, it's like we are having a one-on-one conversation, but there's 50 more people sitting here watching. That are there, and they're right here in our space, right? Any buzz, any beep, or even just the fact that I'm cognizant of this. Like if we were having this conversation and we, there's cameras right here, but there were 5 or 6 people watching us, we would always be aware. And part of our awareness of that is moving our attention away from the one person that's actually right in front of us. And so the way that I think about this is this idea, and anytime I teach a class, this is one of kind of the rules that I teach and out of the gate, which is be prepared to be here and nowhere else. Because if you don't follow that rule in your life, you create lots of problems for yourself. You're at home physically, but emotionally you're at work. Now you're at work and you're guilty about not being emotionally at home. So you're physically at work, and then where are you? You're emotionally at home. Okay. So if I'm having a conversation and I want to be a great active listener, this is what we're doing right now. This is the 10, 20, 30 minutes, hour, whatever this relationship and this time is. So now I'm going to be present and I'm going to be attentive to this relationship and to this conversation. And being present with somebody, being like in the moment with somebody, again, kind of goes back to this idea that this is a great gift. I've experienced professionals who were tremendous at their trade. And I sat down for a consult and they asked all the right questions. They went through all the right hoops. Some doctors are notorious for this. And you walk out and you're just thinking, I don't know that person ever actually listened to me, right? Like I got my prescription or I got my MRI or whatever I came for, but I start second guessing, like, did I say all the things did I run through all the things I was dealing with? Did they, I want to say it's somewhere between like 15 and 18 seconds that a doctor listens, right? That's not awesome.
Right.
Right. So how are we doing in that? I think I think being present and attentive in the moment is very, very hard. The only reason it's hard is we haven't trained ourselves to do that. And if we look at how often are we present and in the moment with our own thoughts, right? How often do we separate out from business or whatever else to really, really deeply think? That probably gives us a clue to how we show up for other people as well.
Yeah. Makes me think of two stories. When I came over to the company and we went to a leadership meeting in Alaska, the first thing that you said that what you had said of like be present and attentive, and everybody else has important things going on too. So to make sure that we're all present and we all feel present, we're going to go ahead and put our phones over on the table here for the next hour and a half. We'll give you 10 minutes to check them, and then we'll keep our phones over the rest that, keep doing that throughout this. So you have the ability to check your business and do all that stuff. But we are valuing each other's time by doing that, which was amazing. And I was a little scared because I've been tethered to it for so long. One of the ways that I was learned to be able to be present and attentive actually is a funny story. We have a group of friends that are also realtors, and realtors tend to be just attached to their cell phones and carrying on conversations while also doing work, right? And it's pretty annoying. So we would go out to drinks once every 3 or 4 weeks, and we made a rule that when we were out to drinks, we all stacked our phones face down on top of each other. And if you had to grab your phone for any reason, you bought the next round of drinks.
I love it.
And it was awesome. We would spend an hour together and we would talk and we would be present for each other and attentive for the things that we were each going through.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. There's I think at the core of being present and attentive is this idea that I'm going to say no to all the other potential options that could happen right now. And that's maybe what our phone represents, is this idea of what am I missing out on, right? Is one of my kids going to get hurt, or is somebody going to ask me to do something that's more fun than this? There's endless opportunities with the phone. And if the phone's there, it's saying, hey, you can kind of be present with this person, but only go so deep, only be so present so that it doesn't interfere with your ability to go do something else that might be better, right? And think about your spouse, right? Think about like, okay, so I'm going to be with you only as long as like there's not something better, and I'm actively looking for that distraction. If we show up that way in our relationships, especially with clients, it's not that they won't use you, right? Even people who are good personal friends, right? They're deep in your network. They're like a really good friend. It's not that they won't use you. It's that what creates raving fans and referrals as a result of that is greatly due to the fact that you stopped and listened even beyond what they thought you needed to really hear them. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I used to, when I worked with more clients than I am currently, because I have a different role, I would physically turn my phone off so that my clients could see when I was doing a listing presentation or a buyer's rep, and show them that I was going to physically be present and attentive to them. I'd turn it off for the hour that I was going to be with them, and I would put it away.
Yeah, which is mind-blowing. Like, who have you seen in the last 3 years actually physically turn a phone off? It sends a message.
I don't know where I got that from, but when I heard it, I was like, that's pretty genius.
Yes.
So, okay. This one is a little bit more difficult for me. This is the fifth one of our 5 points to great listening. Maintaining eye contact.
Yes. It's known as the 70-50 rule.
Okay.
Not as well known as the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
So what it means is if I'm in a listening situation, I'm in a consultation, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to maintain eye contact at least 70% of the time when the other person's talking. And when I'm talking, I want to maintain eye contact at least 50% of the time. So a practical way of doing that, so you don't get paralyzed, like, oh my gosh, and trying to do tally marks, is if I'm listening to somebody, let's say I'm doing a needs analysis, anytime I'm not actively writing something down or taking notes or doing something intentionally, my eyes are here, right? So you're talking, okay, great. And I write that down and now I'm right back. Okay, so that's the way that works. When I'm talking, 50% is fine. Part of that is I might have multiple people that I'm connecting with. So I'm going to be able to maybe talk about some sort of a resource, or I'm showing a binder or a book or something like that. But if I focus everything on something other than the person, what happens is the other person typically over the course of time, they will put their focus where my focus is. And so if my focus is on a resource or if it's a little bit aloof, the mirroring and matching that happens with a client is they feel like they can sit back, they can be aloof, or they can just fixate on whatever the thing is. A few times in my life where I've had somebody sit down and go through a presentation on a desk and they haven't made really good eye contact and we haven't been the connection, I use that as an excuse to not connect with the person. I will just zone out on whatever that thing is on the table, and I'll kind of act like I'm paying attention, and the reality is I'm completely somewhere else, right? So that's what I want to do. And what this ultimately leads me to is if I'm actively listening and I'm present and I'm attentive and I'm maintaining great eye contact, the thing that I get to do also is I get to pay attention to their body language, which over the course of time, what somebody's body is doing and saying will tell you a lot about their engagement in the conversation. And ultimately, when I'm practicing active listening and all of the other 4 points of this, what'll happen is somebody's body language will start telling me that they are also coming into the conversation, which means they're coming into the relationship. As a professional, as a trusted guide, that's what I want. I want them to lean into that trusted relationship with me because I've demonstrated through listening that I'm trustworthy.
It's something that both of us, you teach more than I do, but I do quite a bit of teaching. And some of this aspect comes a little more natural when you teach more, like scanning the room, not just fixating on one person and leaving everybody else to not get the eye contact. You want to make sure that you're spreading spreading your view over so people feel connected with you. Right. The handouts, the PowerPoints, things like that, those can be big distractions, especially if you're just reading off of them and not actually looking at the audience, looking for body language to speed up or slow down the presentations. If you're watching, the audience and they're frantically writing, like you need to slow down so they have more to take notes. Same thing goes with a buyer or seller presentation, right? If they are leaning back and not paying attention and they're crossing their arms, like you're probably not getting good questions to them. If you're looking too much in the presentation guide and they're not paying attention because you're not giving them the information they need.
Right. And if we just zoom out and we think about all this kind of in that context of we want to be the trusted guide. Mm-hmm. If somebody is a trusted guide, let's say you're climbing, like we've been talking about, you're climbing Everest, and this person, you're the real estate Sherpa, you're that person. What's going to happen is that person's going to be attentive to what you're saying. They're not going to be attentive to the guidebook. Like they've read the guidebook on the way that you sent them or whatever that looks like. But it's now, okay, great. You're now my trusted guide, so I'm relying on you and this relationship. And that trumps all the different things that you're going to have, all the different aids, because if you do this well, you listen well, and you deepen that relationship, it's going to naturally lead you to be the trusted guide.
That is awesome. I think I learned quite a bit from this. Hopefully you guys did as well. Hopefully this will have an impact on you, empower your business, and encourage you going into this spring.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. And again, make sure you like, subscribe, and do all the things. It really helps us out. And our next episode.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We're going to be doing a dealer's choice episode. So that, and what we mean by that is we're going to be asking for your feedback on some topics that would be interesting for you. We've gone through 23 episodes.
23 episodes. Yeah.
And we think it's time that you guys get some input.
Yeah, so look for it on social media. Respond back to us. Go to hello@rmgagentpodcast.com if you want to email us. And we just want to know, what do you want us talking about? What do you want to hear from this podcast? We're here for you guys to impact, empower, and encourage you. So send us some feedback, and we'll get on it.
Yeah, and that doesn't just count for this episode. If you want, if you ever want us to do something, or you have some questions, just reach out.
Awesome, guys. Take care.